On a lonely planet slowly spinning its way to damnation, amid the incompetence and unpreparedness of lesser space programs, one team stands resilient against the herds, putting their lives on the line to aid those who were previously unaware of the quick-save option. Yes, it's the incredible adventures of Jebediah and his crack team of Kerbinauts. They are the Blunderbirds. Saving the Kerbin race one stranded explorer at a time.
Hello everyone and welcome to this, the pilot episode of a new series I'm doing called The Blunderbirds, as I'm sure you saw from that very long and drawn out intro. This is a series in which I find people who have got their Kerbals stranded or stuck or otherwise in an impossible to recover situation, and then we'll be sending off a ship to go and rescue them. So in this episode we're looking at Docking Cobra's unfortunate attempt at sending Val to Val, and he has crashed his ship and Val is unable to get back. So he sent the save file over to me, and we can design a ship to go and get Val back. And here's one I made earlier in the vehicle assembly building. Now, those of you with ears will have heard in the intro that it's Jebediah and his crack team of Kerbinauts rescuing people. But in Docking Cobra's save file, Jebediah is dead. This will never do. Luckily, I am a master computer hacker, and through the power of science, we can upgrade his status to alive. And there we go. And while we're at it, we may as well bring back Bill and Bob as well to provide some additional support. Although we can only bring 2 Kerbals with us just because we've only got a 3-seat command module and we need a space for Val. So, sorry Bob, but I think an engineer and pilot are the best ones we need for this particular mission. Especially since this is a sandbox save and there's not a lot of use a scientist can really have. And it is an absolutely beautiful day for a launch. We have the flag fluttering there in the wind with the rocket in the background. As if you couldn't just see that by looking at the screen. Anyway, let's skip to the launch. And ignition! All systems are go, release that clamps? We're off. This is why I'm not an announcer at NASA, as if they actually have announcers that do that sort of thing on a... So, what can we see here to talk about? We've got the 5 vector engines lifting this thing up, as well as being helped by that single solid rocket booster in a similar layout to the Osiris Rex rocket launch. The reason this thing isn't being pushed so far, like being flipped over to the right at the moment, is because those vectors have enormous gimbal and are able to hold the rocket nice and steady, even with that asymmetrical thrust from the SRB. And it's not going to be burning for very long, the SRB. It's just there to provide a little bit of extra kick when we're first getting off the launch pad. It's not really that necessary, to be honest, for this mission, but I thought it'd be a nice little thing to have to make this thing look different. I don't know. Anyway, in an attempt to make this a little bit more interesting as well, this is going to be an Apollo-style mission, in that we're going to be sending a separate lander down to the surface of Val to go and rescue Val, and then that lander will go back up to the main commander module, which will be left in orbit around the moon. Yeah, that's it actually. That's the end of that thought process. So here we are punching through the atmosphere. We've nearly depleted the first stage before we can switch over to the upper stage, which will almost get us into orbit, but we're going to do the main circularization using the final nuclear engine stage. So you can see we've kind of done a very nice sort of gradual curve upward. Our periapsis is our apoapsis even is rapidly approaching the Kármán line, which is 70 kilometers. We want to go a little bit higher than this because we don't have enough fuel in this stage to fully circularize. And because this is Apollo style, at the moment the lander is currently obscuring the engines of the next stage. So we need to put enough time between us and our apoapsis to detach the engine, get rid of the fairings and all that. So there go the fairings now. We can also detach the engine and get rid of the launch escape system. Like I say, we have to put enough time between ourselves and our apoapsis so we can actually reconfigure the layout of the ship and get the engines all, ready to be used. Although I guess we could use the side nuclear engines. We don't want to be exposing the lander to any harmful radiation. So the race is now on. We have 1 minute 41 seconds to get to apoapsis. So there goes Jebediah. Just remove that bit of debris there to reveal the docking port on the lander, and you can see it started spinning quite quickly there. So we can fix this with time warp, but when we reboarded the mothership it started spinning again. So we had a little bit of an interstellar docking sequence on our hands.
Initiating spin!
It's actually very easy. Don't know why I was so hyped up in that movie, to be honest. I had no problems there at all. So we got to apoapsis with not a moment to spare, so we can immediately fire ourselves prograde and get our periapsis raised to be above 70 kilometers and get ourselves into a nice stable orbit. And now that that's all done and dusted, the actual mission can finally begin. So the first thing we're going to do actually is going to we're going to properly circularize this orbit, as in raise our periapsis to around the same height as the apoapsis, just because we're going to be doing quite a big burn to Jool, and it's going to force our periapsis down a little bit. So we want to make sure it's high enough that we're not going to accidentally re-enter the atmosphere as we do our escape burn from Kerbin. And now that that's all done, we can actually go ahead and plan the escape burn from Kerbin. So we can just drag out this maneuver node here all the way to Jool, and we've got an encounter straight away. Yes, I have actually, before I launched this mission, I did make sure I was at the right phase angle prior to doing it. Just as an FYI, if you want to do a mission to Jool, if you imagine the sun as the center, you want the line. So you imagine if you draw a line from Kerbin to the sun to Jool, the angle that line takes is about 100 degrees. It's not quite that exactly, but that's just a rough estimate to go with. 100 degrees phase angle. Kerbin behind Jool is what you want to go for. Anyway, we can begin that burn now, the escape burn. So it's quite a long burn. Ideally, if we were going for a sort of, going for the maximum efficiency possible, we would do it over maybe 2 or even 3 or perhaps even 4 burns at periapsis, just to maximize the amount of time we're burning at our periapsis, to fully exploit the use of the O-berth effect, which states that any burn is more efficient the closer you are to periapsis. But this is a rocket mission, and like I outlined in my Lathe Seaplane mission, links to which are in the description, when we're building a rocket, I don't tend to worry too much about achieving the maximum efficiency possible, because I just add another booster if we need some extra fuel. It's not a problem. So for the sake of just being lazy, and also to make this mission easily replicatable, that's not a real word, is it? Replicable? Is that? In order for you to do this mission yourself, I mean, this is a rescue mission, so I'm assuming most people who will be needing to do rescue missions perhaps aren't quite as skilled. Now, I don't want to insult people watching this video. That's the problem. You might not be as experienced at the game, and so I don't want to be building flying rescue missions that require incredible amounts of precision and knowledge and skill, and really maximizing the use of quite specific orbital maneuvers. We'll go for simple things. And all of that actually goes completely out of the window when we're talking about getting captured at Jool, because I decided to use a Tylo gravity assist to get a Jool orbit. Just because, Tylo gravity assists are a pretty standard method of getting circularized at Jool for a minimal amount of delta V expenditure. So I think it's a good practice to sort of get into. Maybe I'll do a standalone tutorial at some point about how to get a Tylo assist at Jool. But to be honest, for me, I really have any idea what I'm doing half the time either. It's mainly a case of trial and error, creating maneuver nodes and dragging out the various nodes to get yourself an encounter with Tylo that results in you getting circularized at Jool. I mean, the simple method is just to make sure your encounter with Tylo happens before your Jool periapsis, or I guess at Jool periapsis. Yeah, but I thought I'd go the extra mile in this video and make sure that Tylo encounter resulted in a gravity assist that put us on a direct course with Val. Which is not really that hard, but it is harder than just doing a standard Jool capture. So I thought I'd just, maybe show off a little bit. And it actually resulted in a Val encounter that probably isn't as efficient as we could have otherwise had. But I kind of liked the idea of just flinging ourselves straight into a Val encounter directly from Jool. Directly from our Jool encounter, I should say. So here we are encountering the green monster now. Swinging down, waiting for Scatterer to kick in. And what a beautiful view this is. There it is, looming in the distance. And here we are at Tylos. We'll just time accelerate straight past that thing. We don't want to go too fast and potentially screw up our orbit, which unfortunately does happen sometimes when you're going at maximum time warp. But we didn't, and we're fine. And here we are at Tylos. At Val. So we can create a maneuver node just to get ourselves just barely captured, and then we'll do a second burn after our first loop around the orbit to get ourselves fully captured into a stable orbit, or fully captured into a circular orbit, I should say, not a very, very eccentric orbit. And we can begin our burn now. So it's a fairly lengthy burn, so I'm just keeping an eye on these external fuel tanks here, because as soon as they're depleted, we'll detach them in order to save weight and ultimately gain a little bit more delta V for this craft. But we have a lot of fuel left, and because the nuclear engines are ludicrously efficient, it's draining at a very, very small rate. So we should be okay. But there Val is, looming away. Well, getting closer and closer by the second, I guess. I really like Val, actually. I feel like it's a very underrated destination in terms of places to go and visit. I feel like the king of underrated destinations is Dres, because everyone says, lol, Dres is boring, Dres has nothing of value to it. And I think Dres is one of the most interesting places to visit because second, I guess, to Moho, it has the most interesting geographical feature in that it has that incredibly deep canyon that's very fun to explore. I remember back in 2015, I made a video of me taking a rover all the way down to the bottom of the Dres Canyon, and that's something I wish that more places in Kerbal Space Program had. Like, most of the planets are fairly boring. They don't really have any significant geographical features or anything like that. Like I say, Dres is second maybe to Moho, which has obviously the Mohole, which started out as a terrain glitch at the poles, which was then, I guess, incorporated into the game after the fact. Anyway, all that aside, we'll just talk about quickly what's going on here. We're circularizing at Val, and as you can see, Valentina is ecstatic. She is over the moon. She is very excited to know that rescue is on its way. So we can... Well, I guess I just wanted to point out that Valentina is definitely down there. So we can transfer Jeb into the lander capsule, detach it from the mothership, which can then just clear itself free of the lander's course. The mothership, by the way, it does have monopropellant tanks and thermoelectric generators stashed away inside that giant decoupler module, in case any of you are wondering how it was able to continue generating power passively even when we're on the out of the view of the sun. There are thermoelectric generators. You'll see them later on in the video. Anyway, we're coming up to the target now, so we're going to start burning retrograde in just a second. We've made sure we've activated the engine of this lander. And like I said earlier in this video, this is a very much Apollo, not an Apollo replica, but Apollo style, in that we're going to detach the lander from the mothership, land it on the surface, and then for our return flight back to the mothership, we're going to actually detach the upper stage. Well, as in, there is an upper stage that will fly us back, and we'll leave the landing legs and lower engine stage on the surface of Val itself. But all of that is to come. We can start burning retrograde. So I guess the footage here can speak for itself. What was I talking about earlier? Yeah, geographical features. I think that's something that the game could really benefit from. I was talking, like, a squad actually approached myself and a few other YouTube people asking for what we'd like to see in the game. Some of those things were addressed in 1.3, namely it's stupid that the early stage runways are much bumpier than the surrounding ground. That doesn't really make sense. But one of the things that I really want to see is the implementation of more interesting things on the planets themselves. So, maybe things like, volcanic tubes or geysers, or just more craters or big canyons, or just interesting things to go and visit would be quite nice. I mean, yeah, we do have that kind of thing already. For example, like Juna's poles are all icy, and the Mun has some pretty impressive mountain ranges on its north and south poles, and I guess Minmus has the Minmus Flats. But other than that, I can't really think of anything really worthwhile visiting on the various planets. And I think that would be really something that could be improved. I mean, I guess Eve, again, I suppose Eve also has oceans and things, and Lathe has oceans, but other than that, I keep on saying other than that and then adding another qualifier, but I think we can all agree pretty much that the actual planets themselves are fairly boring, like Pol and Bop, and even Elu. I mean, Elu is a good target to aim for because it's just the furthest planet away, but actually on the planet itself, what is there to actually do or see? I think it'd be nice to have more, interesting terrain. Anyway, I kind of skipped over the entire footage playing in the background, but here we are, landed at the crash site, and Jebediah obviously gets out of the wrong command module that doesn't have the ladder because, hey, he's Jebediah Kerman, he doesn't need your enhanced mobility systems. So you can come and check on Val, who, as you can see by her facial expression, is delighted to see him. We can just take down, Docking Cobra's flag and replace it with our own, because damn it, we earned this. And it's the Blunderbird's flag, of course. And we can write an appropriate title for that landing site. Take a picture of that. And we can see with Val, there she is. Incredibly happy to see us. She could not seem more elated and ecstatic than she does here. What a beautiful picture, those two. And all that aside, we can actually skip ahead a little bit. So we'll walk Valentina. We'll take control of Valentina and walk her over to the lander. Unfortunately, the ladder doesn't quite extend far enough to the ground that we can just press F to grab it automatically. But we can just do a little jump. And I'm sure on Kerbin or Lathe or Eve or any other planet where you can't use the jetpack, we could have just jumped and grabbed onto it just fine. It's not too much of a problem. We can do a quick inspection of the lander here just to see if Docking Cobra had any science modules we could have taken the data from, but he doesn't. He doesn't. And this is a science sandbox save, I should say, so there wouldn't have been any science anyway. But yes, we can begin the next phase of this mission. So we can retract the communications equipment and the ladder just to make sure there's nothing delicate that could potentially get damaged upon launch. Open up the map view and try and find the mothership again. Set it as our target. And just time warp around until it's at the best location to begin our launch. So I think that should be a good spot there. I think I started on a tangent about how much I liked Val, and it was quite an underrated place in the solar system. Second only to Dresden, I kind of got on a big tangent about the lack of geographical features on various Kerbal Space Program planets. But I guess retreating back to the original topic, that long time ago it seems now, I really like Val because it's not too hard to land on. It's very, very similar to the Mun in terms of the actual fuel required. So it's very easy to land on, really. And the terrain itself is a nice colour. It's a nice colour, and it's also great because it has a lot of variations of, salt flats or just flat areas and big mountains as well. So I think it's I think it's one of the more interesting places to go and visit in terms of the geography. I guess that was the end of that thought process, really. So here we are, getting our rendezvous with the mothership, so we can just do some various burns at, retrograde, prograde, and towards an anti-target and towards the target to get our encounter as close as it can be. Obviously, the maneuver node maker is your friend in these situations. So there we go. And look at that, a separation of just 100 meters. So we can just time warp down to that close approach, and we can still see our target velocity, as in our velocity relative to the target is still 56 meters per second. So we can kill that off and start burning towards the target and burning retrograde alternating between burning to the target and retrograde until we can get nice and close, as you can see here. So we are pretty much where we want to be now. So we can burn retrograde to kill off all our relative speed, and then gradually burn towards the target. Gradually burn towards the target. So we can use a little bit of RCS to slow ourselves down, although, as you can see, it wasn't really that necessary to use RCS for any of this docking. We could have easily done it using only the engine, which is just as well, because we don't have much monopropellant on that lander. We're only using the monopropellant tanks that are built into those command modules. But as illustrated, we didn't actually need that much monopropellant, and luckily for us, those particular command modules, the grey lander cans, they have quite a relatively high amount of monopropellant compared to some of the others. So yeah, it wasn't really a problem. Anyway, here we are just burning ourselves retrograde just to lower our periapsis to within the surface, detach the lander can, point ourselves prograde, and then burn again to raise our periapsis to above the surface, just so we can make sure we don't leave the lander cans in orbit. Which in hindsight, I probably shouldn't have done, because I'm going to be passing this save file back to Docking Cobra. And the lander module did have relay dishes on it, so he might have appreciated having the relay dish there in orbit around Val. But sometimes I'm a thug that can't be controlled. And my god, I'm never saying that sentence again. Okay, so we're going to now point ourselves prograde along our orbit and just start burning to get ourselves on a Val escape. Now we could, if we were aiming for maximum efficiency, we would have put ourselves on a Tylo encounter or even a Lathe encounter to get ourselves on a Jool escape trajectory for a small amount of fuel expenditure. But I mean, as you can see, we have almost 4,000 meters per second of delta V remaining. So efficiency was not an issue in the slightest at this point, and this late on in the mission, I kind of just wanted to get home at this point. I could tell Val, she'd been on the surface so long on her own, we really needed to just get her home as fast as possible. So we are here burning prograde to get ourselves on a Jool escape trajectory, which will ultimately get us onto an encounter with Kerbin. Again, just playing around with maneuver nodes, you'll eventually get to the point where you can just create a Kerbin encounter straight from Jool. A lot of it's trial and error. Just eventually it will just become natural to you once you've done it enough times. But all that aside, we're just keeping an eye on the fuel levels on those external tanks so we can detach them when they're empty. But then I had a better idea of just waiting until I had a Kerbin encounter and making sure my trajectory actually put us on a collision course with the planet, and then we could detach the external tanks whilst on that trajectory, and then they would be destroyed by Kerbin's atmosphere rather than be left floating through deep space. I know I have left debris throughout the course of this mission, but I thought, if we can keep it to a minimum, we'll keep it to a minimum. So as you can see at this point, we're currently just tweaking around with the maneuver node maker, trying to get our orbital trajectory on a collision with Kerbin, and then so we can just time warp up to that maneuver node there. Perform the burn only 36.7 meters per second, so not a very large amount of fuel, and we have a lot left over. Particularly when we detach those tanks, we'll have a lot left as well, because we'll be shedding a lot of excess dry mass. So yeah, looking at the Kerbal Engineer readouts at the top, we have a huge amount of fuel remaining, about 2,200 meters per second of delta V left over, so we may as well justify that enormous fuel reserve by doing our capturing at Kerbin just using engine braking. I mean, yes, we could have done an aero capture, because we do have an ablative shield on that command module, and the ablative shields in this game are ludicrously overpowered for what they are. Like, it takes an insane amount of re-entry speed to actually destroy all of the ablative material on them. But, just for the sake of using up the rest of the fuel, and maybe I should have... let's just rewind on that and say, I planned this the entire time because I didn't want to, damage any of the delicate systems on this spacecraft, and Valentina is already in quite a, fragile state. We wanted to make sure that we kept all re-entry as gentle as possible, which is why I deliberately and carefully made sure we had enough fuel to do our final capturing burn using the engine rather than using aero capture. And now that that absolute fact and not improvised excuse is out there, we can... I guess there's not really a lot else to talk about, to be honest. We're getting ourselves captured at Kerbin. We'll just, get our periapsis, apoapsis even, as low as we can, without using too much fuel. Then we'll just loop ourselves around, time warp up to the top, burn retrograde just to lower our periapsis to within Kerbin's atmosphere to an altitude of a mere 9,000, the rest being lowered by the separation of the engine stage. You could see that, I don't know if you saw there very briefly, we could see all the monopropellant tanks and additional batteries, and of course thermoelectric generators all concealed within the really big decoupler and the heat shield shroud, which when we detached you could see them. So there we go, deploying the parachutes there, and well, I guess this mission is pretty much a wrap. We'll just wait for them to fully deploy to kill off all of our speed. There we go, and we'll detach that heat shield to really kill off as much speed as possible, and we're going to be hitting this sea at around 6 meters per second, and the water will easily break our fall, so I guess we can pretty much say that this mission was a success. So I'd love to hear you guys' feedback on this series idea. It's something I've been wanting to do for a while, but never really knew about the best way of implementing it. But like I say, doing rescue missions and helping my fellow community, is something that maybe you guys will hate it. I don't know. Let me know. But for now, like I say, hope you enjoyed. Links to all social media, Twitter, Patreon, all in the description. On screen now, top left is the Lathe seaplane video that I mentioned earlier. Top right is a non-KSP video. It's the latest episode of my Planet Coaster series. And bottom right was specially selected by YouTube's algorithm specifically for you. So I hope you enjoyed that one. And, well, again, thank you for watching.